Ozzy Osbourne was born in Birmingham, England, in 1948. His real name was John Michael Osbourne. He grew up in a poor working-class family, living in a small house with 5 siblings. Life was not easy. His father worked night shifts at a factory, and his mother worked during the day. Money was tight, and young Ozzy struggled in school. He had trouble reading and writing and left school at the age of 15. He didn't know what he wanted in life, but he knew he didn't want a boring job. Ozzy got into trouble. He stole things, got arrested, and even spent time in jail for stealing a TV. But music would change everything. In the late 1960s, Ozzy joined a small band called Earth. It wasn't long before the group changed their name to something much darker, Black Sabbath. The band wanted to make music that was scary, heavy, and powerful. Inspired by horror movies and dark themes, they created a new kind of sound. It was loud, it was heavy, and it was unlike anything anyone had heard before. Ozzy's voice stood out. It was haunting and raw. People either loved it or hated it, but they couldn't ignore it. Black Sabbath released their first album in 1970, and it was a shock to the music world. Songs like Black Sabbath, The Wizard, and NIB sounded like something from another world. By the time they released their second album, Paranoid, Black Sabbath became legends. That album included songs like Iron Man, War Pigs, and the title track, Paranoid. These songs became anthems for a new generation, angry, lost, and ready to fight the system. Ozzy, with his wild look and unpredictable stage presence, became the voice of the outcasts. Ozzy wasn't just singing, he was living the chaos. Off stage, he drank too much, took too many drugs, and partied harder than anyone. But his pain and wild life gave his music real emotion. People saw him as honest. He wasn't pretending to be perfect. He was broken, loud, and real. By the mid-1970s, Black Sabbath was one of the biggest bands in the world. They toured everywhere, filling stadiums and selling millions of records. But behind the success, things were falling apart. Ozzy was getting worse. His addictions made it hard to work with him. He would miss rehearsals, forget lyrics, and cause problems during shows. In 1979, the band made a tough decision. They fired Ozzy. It was shocking. He had helped create the band, shaped its sound, and made it famous. But even Ozzy knew he was out of control. He said later that he didn't blame them. At that point, many thought it was the end of Ozzy's career. He was broke, lost, and drowning in drugs. But the Prince of Darkness wasn't finished. In the next chapter, Ozzy finds a second chance, and it comes from the most unexpected person. After being kicked out of Black Sabbath in 1979, Ozzy Osbourne was lost. He locked himself in a hotel room for weeks. He drank all day, used drugs, and thought his music career was over. He felt broken and forgotten. But then came Sharon Arden. She worked for Ozzy's former manager, and she believed in him. She saw something in Ozzy that no one else did. She pulled him out of that dark place, helped him get clean, and became his manager, and later, his wife. Together, they started a new journey. Ozzy put together a new band and began working on his first solo album. In 1980, Blizzard of Oz was released, and it was a huge success. It had powerful songs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. Ozzy's voice was better than ever. He proved everyone wrong. People loved this new version of Ozzy. He was still wild, but more focused. He had something to prove, and he did it. The album went multi-platinum, and fans welcomed him back with open arms. He followed it with more hits like Diary of a Madman and Bark at the Moon. His concerts were loud, crazy, and unforgettable. He bit the head off a bat on stage by accident, and it became part of his legend. But behind the scenes, life was still a roller coaster. Drugs and alcohol followed him everywhere. Fame brought pressure. Still, with Sharon by his side, Ozzy stayed on track, and his music never stopped. Ozzy Osbourne had been thrown out by his old band, but instead of giving up, he built something even bigger on his own. He was no longer just the voice of Black Sabbath. He was Ozzy, the Prince of Darkness, and he was just getting started. The 1990s were wild, emotional, and full of changes for Ozzy Osbourne. He was still known as the Prince of Darkness, but now he was also a husband, a father, and a growing legend. Ozzy and Sharon were raising their children, Amy, Kelly, and Jack, while dealing with the chaos of fame. Life at home wasn't quiet. Between tours, music videos, and loud arguments, their house was full of energy. Ozzy loved his family deeply, even if he didn't always know how to show it. He kept making music and releasing albums. Songs like No More Tears and Mama, I'm Coming Home became massive hits. These songs were more personal, more emotional. Fans saw a new side of Ozzy, not just the crazy rocker, but a man with feelings, regrets, and love for his family. In 1992, Ozzy announced his first retirement tour called No More Tours. But like many rock stars, he didn't really retire. He couldn't stay away from the stage. The music was part of his soul. Not long after, he came back with the Retirement Sucks tour. But not everything was fun. Ozzy still struggled with addiction. He went to rehab many times. He admitted that he was fighting a war inside his mind. Sometimes he won, sometimes he lost, but he never stopped trying. Despite all the problems, he remained one of the most loved rock stars in the world. His concerts were packed. His fans stayed loyal. Young people who weren't even born during his Black Sabbath days now screamed his name. In the 90s, Ozzy proved that he wasn't just surviving, he was evolving. He was still loud, still wild, but now he was also a father, a fighter, and a symbol of strength. The world had changed, and Ozzy was changing with it. In 2002, Ozzy Osbourne became a star again, but this time, not through music. A new TV show called The Osbournes aired on MTV. It was a reality show that followed Ozzy, Sharon, and their kids, Kelly and Jack, in their everyday lives. No one expected it to be such a huge hit. People saw Ozzy like never before, not just as a rock star but as a dad. He was confused by the remote control, shouted at the family's pets, and wandered around the house in pajamas. He wasn't scary anymore. He was funny, weird, and totally real. Fans loved it. Millions watched every week. Ozzy's quiet mumbling and random outbursts became popular. People laughed, but they also connected with him. He showed love to his kids. He respected Sharon. He wasn't acting. This was the real Ozzy. The show won awards, broke records, and brought a whole new generation of fans. Young people who had never listened to Black Sabbath suddenly knew who Ozzy was. He became a pop culture icon. But behind the funny moments, the Osbourne family still faced real problems. Ozzy was dealing with Parkinson's disease, which made him shaky and weak at times. He was also still battling addiction. There were emotional moments on the show, like when Sharon fought cancer and when Ozzy admitted his struggles with pain and pills. Still, the Osbournes stuck together. Through arguments, laughter, and tears, they showed what it meant to be a real family. They weren't perfect, but they loved each other, and that mattered most. By the end of the show's run, Ozzy was more famous than ever, not just as a rocker, but as a husband, father, and survivor. The world had met the man behind the music, and they loved him even more. As Ozzy Osbourne entered his 60s and 70s, the world saw a different side of the Prince of Darkness. The wild rocker who once jumped around stages and bit off bat heads was now moving slower, speaking softer, and showing his age. But Ozzy didn't stop. He kept performing, kept touring, and kept singing. His voice still had power, and fans still filled stadiums. He launched the Ozzfest Music Festival, giving young heavy metal bands a chance to shine. He became a guide, a teacher, and a legend to a new generation of rockers. In 2017, Black Sabbath reunited for one final tour, called The Day. It was emotional. Ozzy stood on stage with his old bandmates, singing the songs that started it all. Fans cried, cheered, and sang along. After decades of ups and downs, the band finished their journey where it began, in Birmingham, England. But Ozzy's health was getting worse. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He also had surgery after a fall, and the recovery was long and painful. He had to cancel many shows. Fans worried. Was this really the end? Still, Ozzy didn't give up. In 2020, he released a new album called Ordinary Man. It was filled with emotion. The songs talked about fear, aging, and hope. He worked with artists like Elton John and Post Malone, showing he could still surprise the world. In interviews, Ozzy admitted he was scared of death. He knew his time was running out, but he also said he had no regrets. He had lived a crazy life and survived it. Even as his body slowed down, his spirit stayed strong. He wanted to sing until his final breath. And through every struggle, fans never left him because Ozzy was more than a musician. He was a fighter. The world stood still when the news broke. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was gone. Fans everywhere felt the loss like a deep cut. Whether you grew up with Black Sabbath, sang along to Crazy Train, or watched the Osbournes on TV, Ozzy had touched your life in some way. He wasn't just a rock star. He was a symbol of survival. From the poor streets of Birmingham to the biggest stages in the world, Ozzy's story was never easy. He fell many times, into addiction, into depression, into pain. But every time, he got back up. He laughed, he screamed, he kept singing. That's why people loved him. Ozzy's death didn't feel like just the end of a man. It felt like the end of an era, the last true rock rebel. The voice of the misfits, the king of heavy metal. But at the same time, it was also a celebration of everything he gave us. He gave us music that helped people through hard times. He gave fans a reason to believe in themselves. He gave the world a show every time he stepped on stage, whether it was with Black Sabbath or alone. And he gave us honesty. Ozzy never pretended to be perfect. He admitted his mistakes. He talked about his fears. He cried on camera. He showed us that even the wildest stars are human too. Ozzy may be gone, but his voice still echoes in headphones, in concerts, and in the hearts of millions. His legacy is alive in every metal band, every tattoo, every fan who still wears black. The Prince of Darkness didn't fade away quietly. He went out with thunder, and his legend will live forever.